And hi, everybody, and welcome back to another great Bullseye episode. My name's Graham Hood.
And I'm John Larter.
And it's great to have you back with us today. We have a very interesting program for you. We have from the United States, Dr. James Thorp, who's going to be discussing an increase in failed pregnancies and infant mortality as a result of COVID vaccines. And he'll be discussing the Clark paper with our data researcher, the Bullseye data researcher, Sally Clark from the Philippines. Welcome to you both. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so one of the issues that we have in the world today is a reluctance by mainstream media to report on the data that's coming out as a result of what we were told in Australia was the world's greatest medical experiment. Our health minister said that to us back in 2021, and we've been living like lab rats in that experiment ever since. Now, an experiment requires that data is properly analysed and that we learn from our mistakes. There should be a thorough debrief in all the things that we are discussing around the last 6 years. But a lot of people are saying it's time to move on. That's past now. But we will live with the ramifications of the last 6 years for many, many years to come. And we've seen news organisations around the globe talking about an increase in infant mortality, talking about an increase in failed pregnancies. We had our own Dr. Luke McClendon, who is a leading obstetrician gynaecologist for a large hospital, a renowned hospital in Queensland, who was fired because he expressed concern about an increasing number of failed pregnancies amongst his vaccinated pregnant mothers cohort. He was fired for raising the alarm with the hospital. The hospital didn't want to know about it. They didn't want him speaking about it. And he ended up selling sheds and pergolas, working for an outdoor entertainment company, building facilities in people's backyards. Nothing could be crazier. But we have joining us Dr. Thorp, Dr. James Thorp from the USA, who was also fired from a prestigious medical institution when he started raising concerns about an increase in statistics that was frightening from his point of view. He has published more than 200 papers. He's very well renowned in the United States and indeed around the world. He has published more than 40 papers on COVID vaccines and the COVID pandemic. He is recognised. He is famous around the world. But he lost his job because he spoke up. His hospital and the staff there loved him. They adored him. They worshipped the ground he walked on. But because he was speaking concern, which is what we want our medical professionals to do, he was cancelled and pushed aside. He now shares a facility called the Wellness Centre with Dr. Peter McCullough and people of that ilk, and they're doing great work. He joins the ranks of Dr. Kim Biss, who's been a guest on this program a number of times. He joins the ranks of Senator Ron Johnson, who he's participated with to highlight the inadequacies of the information that's coming out now that's masking the data that we need to see. People are saying it's not sexy to talk about COVID anymore or talk about the mandates and the vaccines. Well, we don't care whether it's sexy or not. We have to fix this because we are fed up with these 50-year apology cycles where when everybody is dead and where all the protagonists and the victims have passed away or are too late to deal with anything, we come out and apologise. We want remedy now, and that's what this is about. So Sally Clark will be explaining some of the statistics from the research she's done from bureaus of statistics globally, but she's going to be focusing on, I think, some of the data in Australia, and we'll be presenting some slides. And Dr. Thorp and the rest of the panel will be discussing this as we go forward. So, Dr. Thorp, it's really great to have you on, and it's a privilege. We've been trying to arrange this for a long time, and it's great to see you finally on our screen. I've been watching a lot of the stuff that you've been doing, and it's powerful. It's been courageous, and we want you, before we get into this, to unpack a little of the background that you have, where you've come from, how you've trained and got to the position that you're in now, and how you realised that something wasn't quite right.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Rob and John. And Sally, it's so good to be with you again virtually. Yeah, so my story is my background. I'm, of course, went to medical school here in the U.S., and Wayne State University School of Medicine, Detroit. And I graduated from medical school in '79. So I've been in practice seeing patients, pregnant patients, for more than 47 years now. I'm boarded in a general OBGYN, like Dr. Kim Biss, but also did a fellowship, which is in high-risk obstetrics, so it's a separate certification subspecialty, and that currently is like an additional 3-year fellowship. So I was served as an obstetrician gynecologist in the United States Air Force. I am a veteran, I'm a disabled veteran, but I've been in practice really my whole career. And so I have a keen interest in research and always have. I was part of a board examiner for the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology, ABOG, been lauded by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, and served as a board of director for the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, the high-risk OB-docs here in the US and around the world. So I was very privileged and in a position, throughout the pandemic, I was with a very busy hospital, SSM Health Systems, and indeed, I was extremely busy. I think I was a senior maternal fetal medicine specialist there, and I saw kept track of my metrics. From my employment there, I had seen just from early 2019 to 2023, when I was fired, I saw 27,500 high-risk pregnant patients and their fetuses in the womb by ultrasound. So I was a very, very busy, experienced clinician before and during the pandemic, and of course after the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. So that's my background. I will say that I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm a veteran. I've had more vaccines than all of you, and I vaccinated my children. And I worshipped the golden cow, the false idol of the medical journals, the New England Journal of Medicine and other major medical journals, and the organizations which I rose in the ranks, only to find out that I was deluded and really made a mistake. And I've apologized for that publicly. After the turn of the century, I became keenly aware of exactly how corrupt not only the medical journals are, but the government, the pharmaceutical entanglement in the government, and also the medical organizations. So it wasn't surprise. I was very concerned in 2020, especially with the high public medical journals articles that were published that were clearly fraudulent and made up. And I knew this was going in a bad place. Specifically, I'm referring to the Mandeep-Mehra study in May of 2020 in The Lancet that alleged that they had international composition of 95,000 patients they had treated with hydroxychloroquine in just 5 months, and analyzed it and published it. I'm sorry, I've been involved in research for a long time, and that's impossible. And indeed, we called them out, and it was completely fake data. So, and that wasn't the only fraudulent publication. All for a purpose. The EUA in the United States of America, Emergency Use Authorization, would have been illegal had they not villainized hydroxychloroquine. And components, Dr. Peter Navarro and Dr. Stephen Hatfield had been in consultation. They were part of the administration. They had massive number of doses of hydroxychloroquine that they stockpiled. and they were stabbed in the back by the pharmaceutical cartel that had more of a voice in the administration that Dr. Stephen Hatfield and Peter Navarro had. Of course, Peter Navarro went on to being unjustly tried and sent to jail for doing the right thing. The pandemic would have been over by summer of 2020 had they deployed the 70,000 stockpiled doses or more of hydroxychloroquine that they had. So I did an about face. I pushed vaccines in pregnancy after the turn of the century, specifically influenza vaccine and Tdap vaccines. It was a huge mistake. When I actually looked at the data, I realized I had made a mistake and probably adversely affected some of my patients. And for that, I'm very sorry. But I did wake up. I realized that they were going to push the COVID-19 vaccine in pregnant women for two reasons in the United States of America, really globally. The first reason was that the vast majority of healthcare decisions from birth, from the womb to the grave, are made by women. And number two, they targeted pregnant women specifically because if pregnant women, being the most vulnerable population of all others, if they could convince pregnant women and global citizens that it was safe, effective, and necessary in pregnancy, game over. Everybody in the world needs to get a vaccine. So that's what I wrote about in my book, Sacrifice, How the Deadliest Vaccine in History Targeted the Most Vulnerable. And then September 27th, 2021 came around. And at that point, the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology colluded with multiple other organizations, including American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, American Board of Medical Specialties, and the Federation of State Medical Boards. And they threatened 62,000 OBGYN doctors. Threatened them to the point where if you don't kowtow to our recommendations, the draconian HHS narratives pushing the vaccine in pregnancy, you will lose your license and you will lose your board certifications. And I contacted the board and I said, no, this is not the way we operate in the United States of America. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, not happening here. And I got slammed down again and ended up that balance of 2021 writing a massive letter that is made public. It was an open letter to the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology, basically delineating in essence, at that time, just 12 months after the vaccine, 1,019 peer-reviewed medical journal publications documenting death and injury, severe injury, after the vaccine. I referenced all of those, but I did my own analysis on the first 10 months of pregnancy outcome after the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, from the CDC and FDA, and it was horrifying. So I published that, and that's available. That went viral, and never heard from them since. No more threats. But that's why I'm the only, I am told, and I believe it's accurate, I'm the only maternal fetal medicine physician in the world that has come out, blown the whistle, published the data, and spoken on numerous, countless platforms, prestigious platforms like yours, Rob and John.
Dr. Fauci's revelations, Dr. Thorp, in his diaries regarding pregnancy and his text messages to the then CDC director, Walensky, how damning were they? I mean, given they were in January of 2021, I mean, our institutions here, the Australian College of Obstetricians and ATAGI, which is the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisations, put out a joint statement telling pregnant women it was safe to be vaccinated with Pfizer. This is an emergency that should have been stopped in its tracks, shouldn't it?
Well, absolutely. And there was so much corruption and so much collusion. And, I just saw death and destruction in pregnant women and preborns after the rollout of the vaccine, not in 2020, after the rollout of the vaccine. And I think you mentioned Rochelle Walensky, then director of the CDC, part of the HHS, and there was collusion. I believe that there is RICO violations, very, very serious RICO violations. My wife and attorney, Maggie Thorp, and I have published extensively on the America Out Loud platform and giving a legal and a medical paper, if you will, on the collusion, on the complete, total disintegration of data analysis, the collusion, the corruption of the federal agencies, multiple papers on that. And one of the published papers that Maggie, my wife, sleuthed out a couple of things. We did a FOIA in the United States of America. That's a Freedom of Information Act. So any federal government, they are susceptible, vulnerable to a citizen like myself and my attorney wife of getting the information and communications in a selected topic between the government and other organizations. Well, we did that with the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and we saw just rampant collusion. But outside of that, we had over 1,400 pages of communications between a government agency and a captured American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. They're on my website. They redacted over half of the material, but what they gave us was a smoking gun. But it gets worse. They colluded with the medical journals. There's a flow of money from HHS in the United States of America, that's the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and the New England Journal of Medicine, editor-in-chief, Eric Rubin, on that fateful April 21st, 2021, the New England Journal of Medicine pushed the COVID-19 vaccine in two separate articles. One was the infamous Shimabukuro article. The second one was an op-ed, if you can believe this, an op-ed with the New England Journal of Medicine editor-in-chief, Eric Rubin, his managing editor, and none other than Rochelle Walensky. Well, and they really pushed the COVID-19 vaccine in pregnant women, literally threatening them, suggesting that if they didn't take it, they would die or their preborns would die, which is completely nonsense because the published literature showed pregnant women were less vulnerable to death from COVID-19. So, there was, and why would Eric Rubin have Rochelle Walensky on when she wasn't in practice? She wasn't an obstetrician. It made no sense unless there was a quid pro quo.
And Dr. Thorp, just before we move on to the Clark report, I think just given what you've said, and let me just highlight to the viewers out there that Dr. Thorp, I know firsthand the qualifications that you've advised us of in your experience. I mean, it's the equivalent of, in New South Wales, for instance, the child flight helicopter, the consultants that work on those helicopters, dealing with very sick newborns around Australia. Your evidence isn't being sent worldwide from the MSM. I mean, as Ron Johnson said, this stuff is just being suppressed by the mainstream. But back to the vaccines, the childhood vaccines. Aaron Siri, I think, does some very good work in demonstrating just how corrupt the pharmaceutical industries have been in relation to the vaccinations. I mean, would people be surprised to know out there that these childhood vaccines, in some instances, have only been tested on 150 kids for 4 or 5 days?
That's right. I think Sally did a terrific job in the Clark paper of talking about, as I recall, she mentioned Aaron Siri, and I think that she mentioned Aaron Siri in reference to the pneumococcal vaccines after the turn of the century and how pathetically little evidence there really was for safety. including not testing the new pneumococcal vaccines against a placebo. Oh no, it's against an older vaccine. So, and you're right, the numbers are very small. And you can go on. And Aaron Siri and many other experts will make the case that there's not one vaccine currently on the schedule in the United States of America, CDC, FDA. Not one of the vaccines have been tested in a truly randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial. Not a one.
That's amazing. That's a revelation that will probably sink in years to come for people who are just waking up to all of this. Before I bring Sally Clark in, because the work that she's done is a focal point of this particular program that we're doing. Let's ask you one controversial question. I'll ask you another one later on, Dr. Thorp. In your opinion, when does human life begin?
Human life begins at the time of conception. And I testified to that in the United States Senate in 2003 under the Bush administration, when I was asked to be an expert witness on taking down the Partial Birth Abortion Act, which did successfully pass.
Yeah, thank you for that, and we'll refer back to that shortly when we've gone through the Clark report. Sally Clark, you've introduced through our program, through our media, some incredible data and statistics that you have found quite easily. I mean, you put a lot of work in, but this information, this data is freely available on government websites around the world from various bureaus of statistics. Unlock for us, if you will, the premise of your paper.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm very honored to present again. To give you a background, I graduated with a degree in physiology, pharmacology, and occupational therapy. So I've always been interested in medicine and medical science. Ironically, when I did my thesis in pain management, in occupational therapy, I discovered that rates of surgery were proportional to numbers of surgeons in any region. And I also found out that back surgeries did not make any difference to long-term outcomes for pain management. So that was my awakening to become skeptical about the medical system. And later on, that was augmented by my own personal health experiences and that of my children. So living in the Philippines, I work in engineering. I'm interested in data. I do reports. And during the pandemic, we were locked down and I was not able to attend work. And so I started looking at data. And I looked at multiple countries from 2020 through to 2021. And I predicted that once the vaccines rolled out, COVID cases would explode and deaths would explode. And I saw that happening in domino form in every country as vaccines were rolled out. So this amplified my concern on the safety of the COVID vaccines. So moving forward, I was analyzing data and I started to see excess deaths in the Philippines. I raised this with local doctors groups who were against the COVID vaccine mandates. And in the Philippines, we had an inquiry in the Congress into excess deaths. That inquiry did not proceed. It was put on hold and was not completed, despite massive evidence of excess deaths. So when every set of data came out, I would analyze it. And early in 2024, I was looking at the data from the Philippine Statistics Authority for 2023. And the Philippine Statistics Authority has excellent data, very, very comprehensive. In fact, far more comprehensive than I've seen from any other global statistics authority. And they had provided data that showed infant mortality by cause of death and also infant deaths by age of infant, including cause of those deaths. And when I analyzed that data, I literally cried. I was able to see that infant mortality has been rising over time since 2020. Ironically, 2020 was the lowest ever infant deaths in the Philippines. So when infants were not able to access medical care under lockdowns conditions, they stopped dying. They were just at home with their parents. In 2021, infant deaths started climbing, and then they continued to climb. So when I analyzed the data, I said, okay, I definitely have a paper here. I need to do something with this. I hadn't written a paper since my thesis, and I needed some help on that. So I reached out to Nick Hulsher, and Nick Hulsher put me in touch with the scholars from the McCullough Foundation. And together we worked on the paper, Global Implications of Vaccination and Rising Infant Mortality in the Philippines. Peter McCullough recommended Dr. Thorp to come on board, given his expertise in maternal fetal medicine. And we had originally planned to publish the paper at the end of 2025, but I asked that we wait for the 2024 data to be published, which it was in early 2026. And then we included that data in the paper, and we finally published in April of this year. I've done several presentations on this paper. Oops, sorry, I have a cat. She's interested. So we published the paper in April. I've done a number of presentations with various interested parties. It was published, but we didn't have any feedback from any government organizations anywhere. There was no media coverage in the Philippines either. So basically, we've heard nothing about this paper. So I believe it is a very significant paper because the findings are incredibly damning. I think maybe we can start with presenting the paper. So this is the paper that was published on 30th of April from the European Society of Medicine journal. We selected this journal because it is prepared to publish controversial data. If we had tried to publish this through Lancet or BMJ or any of the captured mainstream journals, it would have not been published, and we wouldn't have been able to put this data into public domain. So this paper is covering what I looked at the statistics data from 2000 through to 2024 on infant mortality and trending in infant mortality. Okay, the data covers 41.6 million births and 546,000 infant deaths over that period. I also then looked specifically at cause of death data annual from 2015 to 2024. And from 2020, the government published monthly data and also breakdown by age of infant. And I was able to analyze that data from 2020 up to 2024. So as mentioned, all data comes from the Statistics Authority. I looked at infant mortality across the first year of life by age of infant, and I correlated the changes in infant mortality against the addition of vaccines on the Philippines National Immunization Schedule. And I also looked at infant mortality in the Philippines compared to infant mortality in Malaysia. And this is significant because Malaysia and the Philippines use the same vaccines on their national schedule, but the Malaysian schedule is much more spread out than the Philippines schedule. Malaysia gives their first vaccines at birth, which is hepatitis B and tuberculosis, and then they start at 2, 4, and 6 months. The Philippines also gives the same vaccines at birth, but their schedule is compressed and they give vaccines at 6, 10, and 14 weeks without spreading them out. And in the Philippines, they give PCV vaccine together with the other vaccines, whereas in Malaysia, they give PCV, which is pneumococcal vaccine, separately from the other vaccines. We also looked at what happened over the pandemic years. and infant mortality, and specifically we looked at changes in congenital abnormality, deaths, and we looked at infant mortality relative to the timing of the vaccination and catch-up schedules in the Philippines. And what we saw when we looked at catch-up schedules was that each time a monthly or 2-monthly catch-up schedule happened, there was a spike in infant mortality in the following months. And another interesting finding was that Metro National Capital Region, which is the most economically advanced region of the Philippines, had the highest infant mortality, which is quite a controversial finding. You would think with better socioeconomic status and more access to medical care, we should be seeing fewer infants dying, but that was not the case. Okay, so this is infant mortality in the Philippines from 2000 up to 2024. The big dip is 2020, which was our lowest ever infant mortality under lockdown conditions. Some people have said perhaps this is because deaths were not recorded during 2020. However, in 2020, the government was obsessed with reporting every single death because it was necessary to raise fear in the population. And I believe that the death data for 2020 should be quite accurate. The birth data, there may have been some delayed registrations of birth. Because the 2020 data was so abnormal, we excluded it from our correlation studies because it would have skewed all of the other data. But then we see that from 2021 up to 2024, infant mortality has risen sharply, and infant mortality is now at its worst level in 2024 that it's been in more than 20 years. Next slide. Okay, so I looked at, this is annual causes of death. This is death rates per million registered live births, and this is looking at from 2015 to 2024. And we see that some of the key causes of death, so perinatal conditions, we see the drop in 2020 and then it rises. The second box on the top is congenital malformations. We see that rises sharply from 2020 up to 2023 and drops off slightly in 2024. Just to step back, the Philippines followed mature regulatory agencies for all of their COVID-19 vaccine recommendations. The Philippines Obstetrics and Gynaecology Society, they followed the American College of Obstetrics and Gynaecology exactly in their recommendations. And this was stated in their position papers for vaccination of pregnant women. Pregnant women were vaccinated specifically from August 2021 through to middle towards end of 2023. In 2024, there were no more COVID vaccines officially available in the Philippines. So it is also very interesting that congenital abnormality deaths dropped off slightly in 2024 when pregnant women were no longer being given COVID-19 vaccines from around the middle of 2023. So what we see is overall adverse patterns of infant mortality over time with the rising infant mortality. Next slide. Okay, so this is infant mortality in the first month of life from 2015 to 2024. So each block of lines represents a different time. So first it's less than the first 7 days of life have their own data. So day 0 up to day 7. Then it presents weekly data for the rest of the first month of life. And the interesting thing about this data is, one, that we see overall rising infant mortality across time from 2015 to 2024. We also see a spike in infant deaths on the second and third day of life from respiratory distress and bacterial sepsis of newborn. And we also see sudden infant death syndrome spikes on the third day of life. Now, this is highly significant because more than 97% of infants in the Philippines are born in hospital or medical settings with professional midwives or doctors. So we should not expect that infants should be suffering from birth-related infections because they're being born in sanitary conditions. So the fact of peaks in new causes of death in the second and third day of life would point to something that occurs at the time of birth. And in the Philippines, BCG vaccine is typically given on the day of birth or shortly after, and hepatitis B vaccine is given on the delivery table. The baby comes out and the needle goes in. This is standard practice in the Philippines. There is no need for consent. It is typically not asked for because there is a law stating that it's mandatory.
Let's bring you back in here for a moment, Dr. James. The data that you've been seeing on the screen for the last few minutes, how does that reflect with your American experience?
It's stunningly accurate. You know, the hypothesis of the Clark paper, which was actually generated by Sally before the paper was written, but there are data that is published by a gentleman. He goes by his ethical skeptic, and he's published the data from the United States of America, and it's really quite stunning. You know, he talks really about what Sally has just presented, but presented it with a totally different data set. So if you go to the ethicalskeptic.com and the name of the article that he presents this in is called "Houston, We Have a Problem." And it's quite stunning. In essence, what it does is Sally has done such an incredible job talking about how the mRNA given to a pregnant woman, although this study didn't follow individual pregnant women, that data wasn't available, but certainly it's available on a population-wide basis from the Philippines. And it was very highly pushed like it was in the United States of America. So we know when it started in March of 2021 and so on. So what we see is a really concerning effect from 0 to 4 years of life on those infants whose mothers received the mRNA vaccine. And Sally did a great job referencing the fact that the vaccine, the mRNA, goes directly through the placenta. It becomes bioactive in the placenta, producing spike protein, goes right into the fetal blood. And several studies have shown that. The Lin et al. From the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and also the Chen study, and also the Bartera study showed. So we have 3 studies that document the mRNA goes right through to the fetal blood and is disseminated in the fetal. It crosses all the barriers. So what we see in those newborns who received it in utero is significant increases in morbidity and mortality. And that's what the ethical skeptic presented that data. It's governmental data. And I think you're looking at, I think he calculated a sigma of the inflection point exactly chronologically, exactly like Sally just did. In the United States data, inflection point was early 2021. And 0 to 4 age of life of those children was not good. 20 sigma, as I said.
So we were told at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were raising concerns, and many people were, many medical professionals and scientists were raising concerns. We were told that it's pointless talking about this because we're waiting for the data to come in. Now the data's coming in, it's streaming in, it's flooding in, and we're reluctant to talk about it. Why? Because it's incriminating data. Sally, you've got a couple more slides, I think,
Yes.
that are more than relevant.
Can we go to slide 10, please? One of the key findings of this paper is related to the pneumococcal vaccine, which was added to the Philippines infant schedule in 2015. And I found that this vaccine was between 2015 and 2023 was 93% correlated with changes in infant mortality. And when I added in the 2024 data, it was 73% correlated, 77% correlated with infant mortality. So the addition of this vaccine to the schedule, 3 doses, seems to have, it was either a critical additional load, or it was the vaccine itself causing infant harms. And looking further at that, I did deaths from pneumococcal disease reduce? They didn't. And we also see that there were no deaths from pneumonia, or next to no deaths from pneumonia in the first month of life of Filipino infants, but we see a big spike in deaths from pneumonia starting in the second month of life, which exactly matches when infants start being given the pneumococcal vaccine. So this is a huge red flag. And not only this is one of the most expensive vaccines on the schedule, and it appears to come with massive harm. And in the paper, I think we referenced that this vaccine is the same vaccine given to adults and to senior citizens. And there's been study out of Italy that has found high rates of mortality among seniors given this same vaccine. Yet it's been given in multiple doses to small infants. So this is probably one of the key findings. And from this paper, we call for an investigation and a reassessment of the infant vaccination schedule, both the timing of vaccines given and the number of vaccines given. And also that vaccine, for example, hepatitis B vaccine at birth should be targeted to high risk rather than mandated to all infants.
So where do we go with this? How do we get this message out to the people who need to hear it?
Well, I think, Graham, it's so important, as you mentioned, that this not be swept under the rug, because this was a global hoax. This was the greatest, most tragic disaster in the history of healthcare. One could even say the history of the world. The estimated number of global deaths and injuries exceed literally 500 million. And it's probably way more than that. So where do we go from here? We do exactly what you are doing on this platform. We do exactly what Sally has done and the Clark paper has done, and we keep talking about it because we have to expose the corruption. You know, Senator Johnson, Ron Johnson, I think called me up 3 weeks ago today, you know, before he disclosed the Fauci emails and the Fauci cell phone messages. And, you know, it was, yes, it was some vindication. I wish I had been wrong, but he called me up to kind of review that and how horrible it was. They deceived the American people and the global citizens because they knew there was a problem and they hid it and still pushed it. And that's what corrupt politicians do and corrupt governments do. And we were the leader of the pack over here in the United States of America. And, you know, you mentioned about Trump making some reforms. Well, I'm not real hopeful. I mean, he's tried to do it 2 or 3 other times earlier this year, and he was, in essence, I think his controller, his comptroller, in my opinion, is Susie Wiles, and he was just cut off at the legs. So the vaccines make too much money. They make too much money for the government, for all the corrupted stakeholders, for the journals, for the medical organizations. And the only way we can overcome that is by continuing to expose it and not let them sweep it under the rug.
Can I also raise the topic that even though many people are no longer taking COVID-19 vaccines, the implications are not over. What I'm seeing in the Philippines is, and across all of the Asian countries that I'm looking at, is rapidly falling birth rates. And the birth rates are falling far more rapidly than can be explained by aging population. And this includes populations with which still have relatively young populations, like Malaysia and the Philippines. The births here are falling off the charts. And infant mortality across multiple countries is rising, meaning that infants are still dying and continuing to die in higher numbers. When I look at mortality data, I see a step change in deaths amongst all ages since the rollout of COVID vaccines. This has never gone down back to normal numbers. If it had been a simple pandemic, we would have seen a spike in deaths, followed by a drop in deaths, and normal patterns would have continued. Normal patterns did not continue, and in 2024, 25, 26, we are still seeing rising deaths. So this is an ongoing concern for people who say that COVID is over. And COVID, no, not COVID. The COVID intervention is over. It is not. We know that we have persistence of spike protein. So in the Philippines, even though we have no vaccines since 2023, we still have high rates of congenital abnormalities, meaning there is persistence of harm, even in people who were vaccinated 5 years ago. Dr. Thorp?
Absolutely. And you know, that 20 sigma, for the audience, that's 20 standard deviations. You're looking at the probability of that occurring by chance alone is, you're looking at 0 point, add 20 zeros to that. And, you know, you could fill up the state of Texas with 5 feet of silver dollars. And you know, you're looking at, couldn't even do it. So my point is that there are generational effects, just like there were with the other disasters. You know, really, really early on in my career, we had thalidomide and diethylstilbestrol. And, you know, diethylstilbestrol was ironically, these two drugs were severely teratogenic. For the audience, that means it induces birth defects, not just birth defects, but also long-lasting functional deficits that the baby's born with. And it could go on for generations. And this may be exactly what we're looking at here. It's an epigenetic phenomena. So it is indeed very scary, especially if the mRNA is reverse transcribed and permanently assembled in the DNA of the human population. And Sally is right. Birth rate all over the world are falling.
Dr. Thorp, this data, it's government data, and I think it's important for the audience to understand a bit of an executive summary here. I mean, what we're essentially saying is that the system has been corrupted for a very long time, and what we were led to believe has not been accurate in relation to these vaccines. All of them, in fact, they should all be retested and properly done so that we can see whether they are safe and effective, because the current data says that they're not. And it's the elephant in the room. But even in Australia, the medical fraternity is just silenced by the regulator, AHPRA, which is the governing body here that essentially looks after all the physicians and medical professionals. You speak out and you are taken down like you would not believe. And these medical professionals will not speak up in the majority because they are so concerned about their livelihoods and their ability to continue in their profession. Is that the same in the States? Is that what, or have you got more freedom of speech over there?
No, it's just as bad or worse. And there's a lot of different ways to define totalitarianism, but I would put forth a definition that totalitarianism exists when the majority of the people know the truth but can't speak about it. And I think that's what's going on in Australia. That's what's going on in Canada, in the United States of America, New Zealand. Interestingly, the Five Eye or Six Eye countries are the ones that are the worst. Interestingly, Kim Jong-un in North Korea didn't mandate the vaccine. Neither did the Ayatollah over in Iran. Neither did Xi Jinping, right? But the United States of America, allegedly a free country, does this kind of nonsense. Yeah, this is absolutely, for an executive summary, absolutely correct. There are no good data. There's a large false narrative that goes back centuries about vaccines and this same shenanigans that have been pulled with prior vaccines. You take the measles vaccines, people crying about measles vaccines. Well, there's been maybe 9 deaths from measles since the turn of the century, but there's 20 times that many deaths in the government database from the measles vaccine. They hijack all the benefits of, in the early 19th century, all of the strides that we made with public health, fresh water, sewer systems, and many, many others. All those diseases that we're vaccinated against now, they fell by 90, 95, 98% before any vaccine was ever rolled out for those specific diseases. So that's how the narrative has been hijacked. The global illicit drug cartel, they have a gravy train of about 0.5 trillion US dollars. Well, multiply that times 3.4x, and that's what you get with the pharmaceutical cartel, allegedly legal. They both kill and injure people to protect their gravy trains, and that's just the fact of the matter.
Dr. Thorp, we've got to wonder why this is happening, and it's very, very hard to go past some of the main players. One in particular, it was very interesting this morning. I Googled to find the TED Talk that was done by Bill Gates back in February 2010. And that revealed a whole lot of interesting narrative around that particular TED Talk where he talked about reducing the world's population.
This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3.
What was interesting was the commentary leading up to that. In other words, the narrative from Google, which said that that Bill Gates was not talking about killing children. Well, in actual fact, he was, because the reason I asked you the question earlier about when does life begin, and you said at the moment of conception, and to me that seems perfectly logical. Although there are quite a large number of activists around the world who want to change the definitions around all of that for various reasons. But when you look at the career of Bill Gates, put aside the Microsoft empire, he is the head of what could possibly go wrong. The what could possibly go wrong organisation. He's the head of it. He's decided that the only way we're going to save the climate is one idea might be to put particulate matter in the upper atmosphere so that we can deflect the sun's rays. What could possibly go wrong? He's decided that we need to control all the seed stock in the world. He needs to control all the seed stock in the world, which he does. And the government of India aren't very happy with him over that, and neither are the farmers in India. There's a lot of documentary evidence about that. He's decided now, the latest thing, apart from his mosquitoes, that's right, we were going to put various microorganisms into mosquitoes and put them out there to solve the world's problems. Now he's saying that the world's going to run out of water very soon. I mean, this man also said in that TED Talk that we need to reduce global population. And he did say that we could do that by using vaccines. Clearly, that's what's going on. Clearly, this is about population control. Let's not gild the lily. Let's run the risk of being conspiracy theorists. This is about population control. No doubt about it. And Bill Gates is at the forefront of it. He's pouring billions of dollars into this. His father was the head of Planned Parenting in America. It's always been about population control. Now, if they came out and just said, you know what, we need to control the population, we need to start talking about that rather than splitting off into climate control and you know, net zero and all that other rubbish and mass immigration, all those things, what the main thing we're trying to achieve in the world, those of us who run the world, like Bill Gates, is population control. Then we could all look at this and see why we should think about that and perhaps get on board with it if we need to. But what human being in their right mind would do that? What is Bill Gates going to do? Is he going to hand out straws, you know, and the one with the short straw's got to go? This is just bizarre. And this is why we must keep speaking. This is why this topic is still sexy in the minds of a great many people who think that this is the way it's going. Do you think this is about population control, Jim Thorp?
Absolutely, in part. And I want to expand. Maybe the listeners, or we all could, after this, pull up the videos that are well documented from the hierarchy of the Club of Rome. You know, the Klaus Schwabs, the people on that level, Bill Gates level. And they expand on what Bill Gates said. They talked about reducing the global population to 500 million. We're at, what, 7 or 8 billion now. And the way that he explained that was exactly what you just said and exactly what Bill Gates said in that TED Talk. Well, we can be pretty effective in reducing the population by 15% with vaccines. That's what he said. Yeah. The leader from the Club of Rome, you pull that video up and you'll see multiple times where he says, we need to call the population, reduce the population, but we need to do it in a more humane way. Think about that. That's exactly his quote. So in other words, how do you kill people in a more humane way? Well, I think you've probably seen that over the last 6 years, right? Isn't it more humane? You have people lining up to get a shot. It's really very concerning. And, you know, none of those figures that I talked about before, by the way, if you look at Denis Rancourt, an incredible researcher from Canada, he estimated 2 or 3 years ago that it was 17 million that were killed. And I get the number of 33.4, the injury to kill ratio, and that's right from Pfizer's own data that I calculated myself. And so you multiply 17 million times 33.4, you get the number of people that are injured. And some of these are extraordinarily life-threatening, horrible injuries, where young, beautiful children require full-time life care for the rest of their life. That's a huge burden for a family and for society as well.
And we're going to deal with it.
That doesn't even include the turbo cancers. The turbo cancers are kicking in now. I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime.
Yeah, and that was the thrust of the Senate hearings I attended with Ron Johnson in Washington about 2 months ago. We're seeing all this data coming out. We're seeing mortality rates increasing. Professor Robert Clancy, who'll be attending a major event that we're putting on in Sydney on the 10th of September, was reviewing Japanese data, 20 million in the study in Japan, and showing clearly from a man of incredible credentials, the research of his last few years is saying clearly in a book that he's about to release that that the data's there, that the mortality increases are related to vaccinated people, not the unvaccinated. He's made it very, very clear. So we'll be talking more about that event a bit later on. Johnny, any final comments or questions?
I mean, I think the problem is with the data, and this is the real issue in getting the message across, is that those out there, the detractors that are calling us cookers, say that we're manipulating the data. We're looking at things that we're not dealing with peer-reviewed stuff, and this is the real issue, because the mums and dads out there that go to their GP, that go to their normal doctor, may or may not be aware of what's going on here. You know, they're probably seeing some red flags, but don't think much of it. And I mean, you've had this experience, Hoodie. I mean, you've been to a surgeon. He didn't even realise that people were mandated out of jobs. I mean, so it's so difficult to try and get this through to those people that are watching mainstream TV and just think everything's rosy at home.
Yeah, well, we, John, when we appeared in the Senate hearings into the terms of reference for the Royal Commission in Australia, coincidentally, Dr. Thorp, I referenced the Apollo 13 incident and how that was solved, and we said, Australia, we have a problem. We do have a problem, and this is the thing. Look, there is so much division in this country, and I've seen it in America as well. There's so much division. That division was born out of the COVID era when the government set people aside from one another, and we had, you know, pro-vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. This division is very constructive for governments and the globalists. We've got to see that for what it is. But the main thing is, what we have to do now is move towards remedy. A lot of mistakes have been made. A lot of corruption has been uncovered. But what do we do about that? This is where we need to look at data like Sally Clark puts up. This is where we need to talk to physicians and scientists like Dr. James Thorp. We have a problem. Now, none of this gets fixed and none of it goes away unless we all come together. Look at the disaster around the infected blood scandal around the world. That was 30 years ago. Victims are still suffering and no remedy is at hand for many of them. We have to deal with these issues.
And speaking of blood, okay, the contaminated blood supply, that's the next elephant in the room, and I've just published first authored two papers on it that are in preprint. So that, keep your eyes peeled on that, and look at my posts on X. Those are damning data, part 1 and part 2.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. I've got one final question, very controversial, Dr. Thorp. Can biological men give birth to children?
I think one of our governors, Tim Walz, he thinks so, and he's and now I love what you guys probably aren't aware of the WNBA, what's going on in there with these women getting brutalized by these large men that are pretending to be women. So now some of the people that want to rectify that situation in the NBA are going in and saying, well, you have to take me. And, there's the WNBA is in trouble because they haven't defined it and they have to let these men in. Crazy.
Crazy stuff. Sally Clark, where to for you from here?
Well, I continue to research what's happening with births and deaths, and I continue to publish on Substack. I think we very much have to be grassroots up for sharing information. If everybody says no to an intervention or enough people say no, it will force change at the top. So the COVID vaccines cause harm. Every infant vaccine, every adult vaccine also causes harm. Through my research, I have to say I am a proud anti-vaxxer, because I do not believe that injecting foreign substance into a body can be beneficial. We are having increasingly few children. We must make sure that they're healthy. We must not add additional harm to what we've already done. So please share the information. Please stand up for yourself, and please talk among your friends and share what you know. It stops when we, the people, say it stops. So let's move forward with that.
John.
Well, I just want to finally pick up on what Dr. Thorp just raised in relation to the blood. We've been talking about this for 5 years, Hoodie. I do believe this is the next big thing in front of us, is the tainted blood products from the mRNA, and how the Red Crosses and the blood banks around the world are going to deal with that. It's time to have that conversation now, because it's going to be a massive issue into the future, and there'll be litigation coming out of it. Don't worry about that. I'm certain that there'll be many people who didn't get the mRNA vaccine, that have had surgeries or had complications with procedures that have ended up with a blood product, and they are going to be absolutely fuming when things start to develop from these tainted blood products.
Absolutely. And I think based on that, before we close off, I might just close with a prayer. Lord Father in heaven, we just want to thank you for our guests today. We want to thank you for the courage of people who stand up and speak out despite all the pressure that's put on them not to. Father, the persecution, we're told in the Bible it's coming, and we're seeing it in large amount. But Lord, we want to bathe in the light of your truth. We want to bathe in the light of truth and fact. And so regardless of the outcomes, help us understand what these facts are and apply them for remedy and restitution and restoration. This is what we need, and this is what we seek from you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
And dear Lord Jesus, I want to add a prayer. I just thank you for this incredible platform, these incredibly brave people, and thank you for allowing them to pronounce truth. And I am thankful, so grateful to Sally Clark and the Sentinel Clark paper that she has put so much work in. And thank you, Jesus, for allowing me to be on the platform with these scholars. Amen.
Thank you, Lord, and thank you, James, for that. Now, Johnny, let's just give this event a plug in Sydney on the 10th of September. Before we go and say goodbye to our guests, let's talk about that very briefly.
Yeah, look, an amazing event, Hoodie, at the South Juniors Leagues Club in Kingsford. Doors will open from about 5 o'clock, 5:30 onwards. You can get tickets online at the South Juniors Club, or look for our social media posts with the links. It's $20. It'll be limited to around about 470 people. So you'll need to get in quick, but we've got a great lineup. We've got neurosurgeon Charlie Teo, somebody who's been absolutely ostracised by the medical regulators and is having to operate in China because these grubs in Australia can't recognise that this man is an absolute legend of the neurosurgical industry and provides so much hope to so many people around the world. But we've also got Professor Robert Clancy, AO, who's probably Australia's leading immunologist. We've also got Dr Philip Altman, who's a regular on Club Grubbery and an absolute stalwart in the pharmaceutical industry, has been a major player in the getting through of drugs for large drug companies, and he's done an absolute about face when he's seen the data on what's going on. Very similar story to basically all of us, that when we've actually woken up and seen what's going on, the data is overwhelming. And so Dr. Philip Altman will also be there as well, and our very special guest being flown in from the United Kingdom, and somebody that we've been on tour with, Hoodie, Professor Angus Dalgleish, an immunologist, a virologist, and an oncologist, emeritus professor at St George's Teaching Hospital in London. He's formerly worked at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, and also as a flying doctor in Australia. And he is absolutely astounded that these mRNA products are still on the market. He has advised globally that these products are causing turbo cancers and many other side effects. And so we're running this debate. We've got politicians. We'll have Senator Alex Sandy, Malcolm Roberts, John Ruddick from the Upper House in New South Wales. We're hoping to get some very special people zooming in from the United States as well, and we'll reveal all those names shortly. But media personalities, it'll be a great lineup, and we're really hopeful, Hoodie, aren't we, that Dr. Kerry Chant will accept the invitation to actually come and have a discussion around the safety and effectiveness of the mRNA vaccines. This is to push for a Royal Commission. I don't think we can state that any clearer, that this is a necessary outcome for the benefit of people globally. We need answers, and they need to come and front up and speak about this. I mean, Kerry Chant, as the Chief Health Officer in New South Wales, was advocating the mRNA vaccine with Indigenous people on the New South Wales Health website only last week. But she's been at the helm of all this. So we're inviting all politicians, aren't we, Hoodie? We've got, the head of the TGA invited, the AMA. There's so many people we've invited. And if they don't turn up, well, it's up to them. They'll have to explain to the public why they didn't.
And the event is prominent Australian voices calling for a Royal Commission, a COVID Royal Commission, which was promised us by Australia's most infamous Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. We're calling for that. It's not about hanging people out to dry. It's about finding a resolution and getting answers. It's time for that to happen. So we look forward to seeing you there. There'll be a lot more about that event in the coming days. Dr. James Thorp and Sally Clark, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your courage and research. Thank you for your humanity. We haven't seen the last of you. We would love to conduct some more interviews with you both. And Dr. Thorp, you may even consider putting a 3 or 4 minute video together for our program in Sydney on the 10th. We'll talk to you about that a bit later. But
love to do that.
We have to solve these problems. They are difficult situations to talk about. You can't heal a wound by saying it's not there, Australia. And so we've got to do these things. So on behalf of everyone at the Bullseye team, I want to thank personally our producer, Rob McKnight, who's doing an amazing job for us. Rob, we love you and we thank you for that. And also our Chief of Staff at Bullseye, Tanya Danok. Amazing work. She's really elevating this program to where it needs to go, to break outside the bubble. Suzanne Burns, who's our production admin, and Stuart Robertson, our technical guy. We couldn't do it without you all. We love you and we thank you all. So, Johnny Larder, you've often been heard to say,
you just couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't make this stuff up. Stay out of the trees, Australia, and don't forget, people only drive you crazy if you give them the keys. God bless you, and we'll see you next time on Bullseye. Bye for now.